Fargard 3. The Earth. In 6 parts, 1 through 6. The 5 places where the Earth feels most joy. 7 through 11, the 5 places where the Earth feels most sorrow. 12 to 35, the 5 things which most rejoice the Earth. 36 through 42, corpses ought not to be buried in the earth. There is a resemblance as to words between the first and second parts, but there is none as to matter. No clause in the former has its counterpart in the latter. There is more resemblance between the second part and the third, as the first 3 clauses of the first part, 12, 13, 22, relate to the same things as the second, third, and fourth clauses of the second part, 8, 9, 10. Parts 1 and 2 are nothing more than dry enumerations. Well, we'll see. Part 3 is more interesting as it contains 2 long digressions. The one, 14 through 21, on funeral laws. The other, 24 to 33, on the holiness of husbandry. The 4th part of the chapter may be considered as a digression relating to the first clause of the 3rd part. 12. The things which rejoice or grieve the earth are those that produce fertility and life, or sterility and death, either in it or on it. The subject of this chapter has become a commonplace topic with the Parsis, who have treated it more or less antithetically in the Ma'inyo card, chapters 5 and 6, and the Ravaets. The second digression, 24 to 33, is translated, so parts, still in part 3, is translated in Haug's essays. 1. O Maker of the material world, thou Holy One, which is the first place where the earth feels most happy. Ahura Mazda answered, it is the place whereon one of the faithful steps forward, O Spitma Zarathustra, with the holy wood in his hand. The wood for the fire altar. The Barisma in his hand, the holy meat in his hand, the holy mortar in his hand, fulfilling the law with love and beseeching aloud Mithra, the Lord of wide pastures, and Rama Havastra. And the Barisma is now called Barsam. It's a bundle of sacred twigs which the priest holds in his hand while reciting the prayers. They were formerly twigs of the pomegranate, date, or tamarind tree, or of any tree that had no thorns, and were plucked with particular ceremonies, which alone made them fit to be used for liturgical purposes. The Parsis in India found it convenient to replace them by brass wires, which, when once consecrated, they can be used for an indefinite period. It is the Barisma which is alluded to by Strabo when speaking of the bundle of thin twigs of health, which the Baga hold in their hand, while reciting hymns. Tas dah ep sadas poi unte palan Kranan, Rabdon, Marik, Inon, Lepton, Desman, Katek, Utes. So 15, 3, 4. 2 and 3 is listed here as 6 through 10. O Maker of the material world, thou Holy One, which is the second place where the earth feels most happy? Ahura Mazda answered, it is the place whereon one of the faithful erects a house with a priest within, with cattle, with a wife, with children, and good herds within, and wherein afterwards the cattle go on thriving. Holiness is thriving, fodder's thriving, the dog is thriving, the wife is thriving, the child is thriving, the fire is thriving, and every blessing of life is thriving. Havana, some order used crushing the homa or home. There's an entity that's said to give good folds and good pastures to cattle, and thriving by performance of worshipful acts. Of course, that was the implication. 11. O Maker of the material world, thou Holy One, which is the third place where the earth feels most happy? Ahura Mazda answered, it is the place where one of the faithful cultivates most corn. They're not talking about corn, but they're talking kernels, grass and fruit. O Spitma Zarathustra, where he waters ground that is dry, or dries ground that is too wet. 15. O Maker of the material world, thou Holy One, which is the fourth place where the earth feels most happy? Ahura Mazda answered, it is a place where there is most increase of flocks and herds. 18. O Maker of the material world, thou Holy One, which is the fifth place where the earth feels most happy? Ahura Mazda answered, it is the place where the flocks and herds yield most dung. 21. O Maker of the material world, thou Holy One, which is the place where the earth feels sorest grief? Ahura Mazda answered, it is the neck of Arazura, whereon the host of fiends rush forward from the burrow of the drug, with the burrow of the drug. So 7 here starts part 2 here. But the neck of Arazura he griva, plain, is a mount at the gate of hell, whence the demons rush forth. Is also called the head of Arazura, or the back of Arazura. Arazura was the first name of a fiend who was killed by Gayomard, Ma'enyo e Card, 27:15, and the Mount Arazura was most likely the mount to which he was bound, as Asa Dahaka was the Demavan, kind of a Promethean sort of myth. Remember, Darg or Druge is the lie. 25. O Maker of the material world, thou Holy One, which is the second place where the earth feels sorest grief? Ahura Mazda answered, it is the place wherein most corpses of dogs and of men lie buried. 28. O Maker of the material world, thou Holy One, which is the third place where the earth feels sorest grief? Ahura Mazda answered, it is the place whereon stand most of those dogmas on which the corpses of men are deposited. Sorry about the squeak against the there. 31. O Maker of the material world, thou Holy One, which is the fourth place where the earth feels sorest grief? Ahura Mazda answered, it is the place wherein are most burrows of the creatures of Engra Ma'enyu. With regard to dogmas, nor is the earth happy at that place whereon stands a dogma with corpses upon it, for that patch of ground will never be clean again till the day of resurrection, although the erection of dogmas is enjoined by the law, yet the dogma in itself is as unclean as any spot on the earth can be, since it is always in contact with the dead. The impurity which would otherwise be scattered over the whole world is thus brought together to one and the same spot. Yet even that spot, in spite of the Rava'et, is not to lie defiled forever, as every 50 years the Dakmas ought to be pulled down, so that their sites may be restored to their natural purity. And remember, the Dogma of Engramenu, or the Church of Ahriman, uses this principle of the pits or burrows of the creatures of Engramenu as, like the side fats diagonally off from like the Enochian tablet, or as seen as a dogma. 34. O Maker of the material world, thou Holy One, which is the fifth place where the earth feels sorest grief, Ahura Mazda answered, it is the place whereon the wife and children of one of the faithful, O Smetama, Zarathustra, are driven along the way of captivity, the dry and dusty way, and lift up a voice of wailing. Before we start part 3, we have where they're the most Kraftstras, one of the faithful is killed by an enemy. 38. O Maker of the material world, thou Holy One, who is the first that rejoices the earth with greatest joy, Ahura Mazda answered, it is he who digs out of it most corpses of dogs and men. And there's no counterpart given to the first grief because, as the commentary naively expresses it, it's not possible to dig out hell, which would be done at the end of the world. 41. O Maker of the material world, thou Holy One, who is the second that rejoices the earth with the greatest joy. Ahura Mazda answered, it is he who pulls down most of those dogmas on which corpses of men are deposited. 44. Let no man alone by himself carry a corpse. If a man alone by himself carry a corpse, the Nasu rushes upon him to defile him from the nose of the dead, from the eye, from the tongue, from the jaws, from the sexual organ, from the hinder parts. This drug, this Nasu, falls upon him, stains him even to the end of the nails, and he is unclean thenceforth, forever and ever. No ceremony in general can be performed by one man alone. 2 mobids are wanted to perform the Vendidad service, 2 priests for the Barashnum, 2 persons for the Sogdid. It is never good that the faithful should be alone, as the fiend is always lurking about, ready to take advantage of any moment of inattention. If the faithful be alone, there is no one to make up for any negligence and to prevent mischief from arising from it. There is a danger greater than in the present case, where the fiend is close at hand and in direct contact with the faithful. 49. O Maker of the material world, thou Holy One, what shall be the place of that man who has carried the corpse alone? As the Nasu took hold of him, he has become the Nasu incarnate and must no longer be allowed to come into contact with men whom he would defile. Ahura Mazda answered, it shall be the place on this earth where is the least water and fewest plants, where on the ground is the cleanest and the driest, and the least passed through by flocks and herds, by fire, the son of Ahura Mazda, by the consecrated bundles of Beresma, and by the faithful.